There's nothing questionable about asking a question. In fact, a good, solid, to-the-point question can be the laser beam-guided, volcanic, fire-breathing, diamante-encrusted hero that may just change the world forever. How do you think we found out the Earth was spherical? Got to the moon, discovered penicillin or the eurythmics? You guessed it. Someone asked a question and someone went about answering it. This is why a good question is not about the meandering of its setup or the demonstration of the questioner's expansive knowledge of the ponderings of Nietzsche or the finer points of Klingon mating rituals. It's about what it gives birth to. Nurse, please tell me it's an answer. A good question can change the world. Are you going to ask one today?
Welcome. I hope this thing's still working. Oh, it is good. So I get to roam around today, which is really exciting because we figured out that the microphone has an on button, and that's what we're doing wrong each time. I'm Pat. I do some of the tutorials here, and I went through the process that you guys are going through right now. So in 4 years' time, maybe you'll be standing here giving this lecture because all the other amazing experience lectures at the University of Newcastle are unavailable right now. Today we're going to have a look at where we've come to so far in 1008, and I've set a time delay on the slides. So we're going to have a look at a few key questions about education sociology. So 1008 so far, where we're at, you've mapped your initial schema of education. We've talked about what you believe the education system is for, what you think schools are for. We've explored the history of mass education in Australia. So we've talked about some of the professional and legal frameworks about being a teacher. And for the past couple of weeks with Matt and in tutorials, we've gone through the psychological individual level of education. So learning is a process. What goes on in your brain, what goes on in the classroom between learners as individuals and you as a teacher. And what we're going to have a look at for the next 2 weeks is the social context. So to take it from that individual level of what's going on up here to look at the broader picture of what bears down on you as a teacher in the classroom and students in the classroom as well. It'll skip in a second. I'll try and stall for time in the meantime. But yeah, I like establishing that distinction between what's going on at an individual level, psychologically, and then what goes on at a social level, sociologically, broadening our imaginations to cover the social dimensions of teaching and the classroom. So what is sociology? What I'd like you guys to do for a minute or so is turn to the person next to you, have a think about a movie or a TV show that features education, teaching, schools. There's a couple of examples up there. Mona Lisa's Smile, I think I've said to a few people in tutorials. Dead Poets Society, classic. So have a chat to the person next to you about a movie that you're familiar with. Boston Public, I don't know if anyone saw that. Tell me about it. Oh, I've never watched it. I don't remember ads for it. And what stood out for you there? What did those issues look like? So, just thinking for a second, if you were talking about those aspects of the film that you paid attention to or remembered, so we were sort of considering Degrassi Junior High over here, something I never watched. I always thought it was a lame show, but obviously it was really cool. I wouldn't go that far. If you were talking about those issues affecting the individuals in the school, so how you personally felt about this, how it might be related to your learning in the course, you're probably looking at that psychological domain, the individual domain. If you wanted to go to the sociological level, you're talking about what did that say about our society. So Dead Poets Society, a film that I really like, there are a lot of tensions you see in that movie between the world that Robin Williams exists in when he's trying to educate these kids, sort of break out and be individuals, and they come up against social expectations. That's what drives that kid to kill himself at the end of Dead Poets Society. The expectations of his parents and of the society that he's born in. Pardon? Sorry, I don't mean to ruin the plot. I told you, it was brought out in the 80s, so I figured you might have caught up with it, but sorry. The Gen Y cohort, I really apologise for ruining that. You probably hated it during high school if you were made to watch it and fell asleep. So those social expectations that bear down on kids in the classroom and on teachers. And the same thing happens in Mona Lisa Smile, if you saw that film. I'm not going to ruin the plot of that one. So Anthony Giddens said, sociology is the scientific study of social groups, whole societies in the human world. Its subject matter is our behaviour as social beings. Most of us see the world in terms of familiar features of our lives, so family, friendships and work. If you look up online, here's a concept for you, the monkey sphere. Monkey sphere. So it's that small circle of acquaintances and friends, and that's about the extent of your concern in everyday life, yeah? And then if you try to broaden that out to the big picture about what goes on globally, it's the outer reaches of your monkey sphere. This isn't an academic term, by the way. I think it was on cracked.com or something like that. But it's the outer limit of your ability to care. We all care about ourselves first and foremost. And then we get to that level of family and friends. And then if you want to broaden your imagination out to an even bigger picture, we're looking at caring about Australians, caring about sections of the community, maybe Aboriginality, maybe people who have English as a second language, people who have a disability, people who are carers. There are all these big picture concerns, and that is part of the sociological imagination. To think like a sociologist, to take a broader view and not accept things as natural or inevitable. So things don't just happen, they happen for a reason. And it's not just the things that go on in our heads, but it's also the things that go on at a broader social level that impact us. C. Wright Mills used this term to describe a way of thinking where the individual thinks beyond her own personal concerns or troubles, recognise that these are often the consequence of bigger public issues. There's an amazing quote that's going to come up in 2 seconds, I hope. I'm also going to sort of pace up here because I feel like it. Hey, how you doing? Hey, the back. You don't get much attention up here, so I thought I'd, come up and say hi. Broaden my sociological imagination so I can get up here. Thinking like a sociologist. What are the bigger pictures and when is this slide going to change? Why did I set such a long time delay on this slide? That is the question. Whatever. Welcome. Alright, the first fruit of this imagination and the first lesson of the social science that embodies it is the idea that an individual can understand her own experience and gauge her own fate only by locating herself within her time period. That she can know her own chances in life only by becoming aware of those of all the individuals in her circumstance. It is not enough to say I'm an individual and that my path in life depends solely on my choices. We are part of a community. We are part of a nation and the human race. And all of those decisions and all of the massive social forces that take place globally impact on us as teachers and as learners. It is important that we situate ourselves within that global imaginary. Yes? You see what I mean? Are you sure? Awesome. So become aware of all these circumstances. This is our goal for education sociology. Thinking in the bigger picture. Man, I put a really long delay on these things. Sociologists of the heart theory. Why? Trying to understand something as complex as the social world requires that we break it down. We create theories and ideas that look to govern how we react to the world. So, sociological theories have descriptive, explanatory and predictive power. They can describe the circumstances that we find ourselves in. They can explain, or they can help us to explain what is going on in the classroom and what is going on in society. And they have some predictive power, not ultimate predictive power, but some predictive power. We can sort of extrapolate what will happen in some circumstances. We know that socioeconomic status is a very, very powerful indicator of a student's learning outcomes when they come out of school. You go in with a low SES, we'll talk about this in a moment, a thing called cultural capital. If you come from a background where you can't necessarily have been provided with all the education resources that you would desire before you get to school, that's a really strong indicator of where you'll come out the other end of the system. So we have some predictive power. So developing a systematic theoretical understanding of the forces which shape our lives allows us to exercise control over our lives. We study education psychology because what goes on in our brains helps us to understand how we learn. And we do the sociological level because what goes on at a systematic level helps us to understand how we teach and what we teach and why we teach it, and how learners respond to those broad social factors as well. Are you with me so far? Okay. So we're going to have a look at three key social theories today. Functionalism, or structural functionalism you might see it written as, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. And if you've done the reading already, it's sort of, I know it's dense text, but it actually really goes into a few of these ideas in really cool, fascinating detail. But you've got to throw yourself into it, maybe with a glass of red. Theoretical lenses is a really cool concept, like using sunglasses to look through at the world. Some are polarised in a certain way, so they filter out certain kinds of light. And just like that polarisation, when we look through different theoretical lenses, we filter out certain kinds of light and we look at the world in a different way. So to start with structural functionalism, this social theory emphasises the organic unity of society. Functionalists suggest that certain needs must be met for a social system to exist. So think of society as a big machine. And we are all cogs in this machine. We all contribute our little part to it. Even the people at the back, we are all cogs. Yes? Tick-tock. A functionalist might argue that high schools run smoothly because each person knows their place, because each group knows its place, and this is the right order of things. You know what I mean? We've got to churn out a certain number of people to work in different fields. We need doctors, we need lawyers, we need maths teachers, we need engineers, we need garbos, we need checkout chicks. So the structural functionalist view goes, society is a machine, and schools have to help us sort people into the different sections of the machine to keep it running smoothly. Disrupting social norms is like interfering with a vital part of the body. If we sort of use this machine metaphor as a metaphor for the human body, if an organ shuts down, the whole machine starts to shut down. If different cogs break, other elements of the machine will break. And what I've got up here next is I figured it might be a good idea to find out what a student feels in this circumstance. You know what I mean? We throw them into this machine, the engine room of society, schools, and we go, right, how does a kid react to this? How do you think that a learner would react to these social expectations? Do we think that society is this smooth running machine? No? A shaken head. Why? No worries. But it's an interesting thing. You shake your head straight away. Do we think society is a smooth running machine? No. I probably agree with you. I don't think it is. There's so many problems with the machine. And what I'm trying to do is stall for time until this video starts, and we can see how would a child respond. Give it some thought though, while we wait. If you found out, or if you understood as a child that there were expectations on you from broader society, for economic productivity for example, if you have a look at the Building the Education Revolution documents that came out at the start of the Labor government, it's all couched in terms of economic productivity. Here's our video.
I don't know if I want to get a good job. I don't know. My dad always says you're going to get a good education, Gina, and that's why he's always busting me for doing all the shit that I do, because we're out at the shops in the afternoon and stuff, and my dad always gets pissed off because he wants me to do homework and shit, to get a good education, to get a job and to be a mechanic or some shit that he wants me to be, plumber or some shit, landscape gardener or some fucking shit. I don't want to get a job like that. That's fucked up. Why would you want to do cleaning up people's shit for money? That's bullshit. I want to be a dancer. I want to be a break dancer. And just travel the world and shit with my crew. And get the Porterhouse crew up to a really good level, and then go and tour the world with my boys. That's what I want to do professionally. But now I never tell my dad this because he will never get it. And whenever I do tell him, he just tells me, he says, you're fucked up. That's a fucking stupid idea. Why don't you be a priest or some shit useful? He wants me to get into the church and do some shit that's useful for the community. But I don't want to. I can't bother doing that.
I don't want to. Couldn't be bothered doing that. And what does his dad want him to do? Something useful to the Islander community. So the way we frame education... Oh, whoa, is that still making noise? Yeah, okay. The way we frame education is around it being useful for the community. This is the structural functionalist thing. There is a purpose to education, and it is to fuel the social machine and the economic machine. So a couple of the things that functionalists are interested in. Social control, the way that things are kept running to maintain the status quo. Do something useful. What was it? Become a landscape gardener. Adaptation, or how social systems adapt to needs slowly over time. So machines evolve slowly. Socialisation, or the way social rules and values and beliefs and norms are passed on. So what are the expectations that Jonah's dad has on him? What are the social expectations that bear down on a learner from outside the classroom, and the social expectations that will bear down on them from within the classroom? Belief systems or ideology, so the way values and culture... I got into an argument with someone on the train yesterday about this concept of ideology. We are immersed in it every single day. Don't ever let someone tell you that this is ideological and this is not. Ideology is the system of values and beliefs that we bring to every day of our lives, and we all have one. We all have values and beliefs that we bring to bear on everything that we do. So don't let someone tell you that schools are not ideological places. The choices about what goes into the curriculum are ideological choices. The funding that we give to schools is an ideological choice. And at the moment, from both Liberal and Labor governments, you hear about schools as fueling the economy. When Barack Obama got elected, he made this big point about education being the turnaround for the American economy. It's all about economy. That is an ideological choice. And it's sort of premised on a structural functionalist view of the education system as driving a certain concept of society. Social reproduction and stratification. So schools reproduce the structures that we have in society. They say, if you go to an elite private school in North Shore of Sydney, you are more likely at the moment to be a federal cabinet minister. You are more likely to be a High Court judge, a Supreme Court judge in New South Wales. You are Prime Minister of Australia. And if you go to a public school, I don't know, in Tennant Creek, you are likely to end up in Tennant Creek doing exactly the same thing that your parents did. That is reproduction, social stratification. That can happen at schools, but schools can also interrupt that process. So they are opportunistic places, but they are also reproductive places. Schools provide students with the knowledge, skills and values to keep the nation and industry chugging along. They socialise students so that they know the absolute right and wrong values of society. So this goes back to, who are you as a teacher when you're in the classroom? The documents that get produced, curriculum, syllabus, Melbourne Declaration, the Adelaide Declaration before that, the BER framing documents, all of this affects your practice as a teacher. What you are implementing is somebody else's ideological vision of society, the right and wrong values. There's a curriculum review going on right now And they picked, Christopher Pyne, the Federal Minister for Education, picked two of the most conservative right-wing ideological warriors in the education field to review the history curriculum. And some of you are going to have to implement their changes to the curriculum. Whose values are right and wrong in that concept? Schools, and so what is the functionalist view of schools? What are they for? Schools should sort individuals into economic and social roles based upon ability, hard work, merit and achievement. So it's recognised through formal examination qualifications. Schools work on this idea of a meritocracy. Can you please put your hand in the air if you've heard that expression before, meritocracy? Okay, a couple. Can I get 4 volunteers? Or I'll just pick you. Come on, come on, come on. Get excited, get on it, come on. Yep, there's 1. Who else, who else? 2, 3, 4. Line up here, please. So the idea of a meritocracy is that all things being equal, if you go into a school and you put in effort, you come out the other end with a good degree or high ATAR and you succeed in life. Because that's how it works. Hard work equals success. Yes? Do you agree? Hard work equals success. If I work hard, I do well, I succeed. If you agree, please. Okay. But in practice, there are other factors that come to bear over here. So, Albo, just stand here for me. And then we've got Kate. No. Jamay. You can just stand here for me. And Gina, you can come and stand over here. And where have we got? So we've got Albo, we've got Jamay, and then... What's your name? Hannah. So Hannah, you can just stand here. So, let's have a look at our 4 students here. They all work hard, they should all do well, yes? We've got, I don't know, echo people, there's 4 people lined up across the room. You'll miss out on this part, you should have showed up. So if you have all these kids starting at an equal playing level, and Albo puts in a whole lot of effort, and Jamay puts in not that much effort, you'd probably expect Albo to be standing, what, here? This is the race of school. Come up here, Albo. This is the race of school. Here's your finish line, and here's, Governor General, you know what I mean? Sir Albo. And then here's Jamay. Come over here. Hairdresser. Now,
Funny, you picked hairdresser.
ironic, isn't it? The things you miss out on, you crave the most. So, but let's bear something in mind. Albo comes from a poor background. So if you all started, back to the starting point here, if you all started with an equal amount of cultural capital in your backpack, depending on your effort, you end up somewhere on this line, yes? But unfortunately, Albo, you don't start at this starting line, you start back here. So please come back here, Albo. Mum and Dad couldn't afford books. Mum was sick. Jamay. Mum's quite wealthy. Dad's never at home. He owns, what? An island somewhere. He's got to go off there. So Jamay, you can come up here because you went to Pymble Ladies College. Gina's dad owns Western Australia. Just come over here, Gina. So you can stand there and... Yeah, on all of us. And the rest of us can pay $2. And Hannah, you start off, you work hard, you went to Gosford High, you can come over here. And your hard effort gets you to this point. And your mum and dad probably bought you a lot of books and they read to you. And Albo, you tried very, very hard. You can come up to here. But if we treated every kid in the education system exactly the same, so if we had full equality in the education system, this is the stratification that we get. Do you see why? You start off with different cultural capital in your bag. We don't have a meritocracy in society. We have an unequal society. And if we treat every kid equally, we still end up with an unequal society. It's the difference between equity and equality. That when we're trying to create equity, we actually don't need to support Gina that much. I think she can handle herself fairly well, regrettably. Jamay, we probably, as a community, don't need help too much, but down here we probably do need to do a bit of work as a society to lift everybody up. Thank you very much, guys. A round of applause. So, conflict theory. So that was structural functionalism. Yeah, we see school as a machine. Conflict theory is a little different. It reacted against the functionalist view of the world. It understands society as a system of interrelated parts that are in a state of flux and conflict with each other. So social groups are continually engaged in interaction and struggle. It sort of evolved from a Marxian concept of the world. And that is that conflict theorists might view schools as a battleground. Students are in a constant state of conflict over their status. They're trying to jostle for position in the hierarchy. And in many ways, the education system itself is a way of stratifying and creating conflict. You might see, okay, individuals continue to struggle over who has the right over limited resources in the school. Originally, these slides used Glee as an example, but I've never actually watched Glee. But there was a lot of stuff about the principals sort of struggling with different heads of department and replicating a particular model of society where people are in competition with one another and conflict. There's also a values level that applies over the top of this too. The conflict theorist view of the education system sees that I'm rich, yeah? My name's Gina. I don't really want my kids to go to a school with Albo. So I'm going to send my kids to, I don't know, Barker College. Does it sound familiar? Hang on, this slide doesn't go through properly. Yes! For those of you who saw Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 1, somehow in Australia, without a subscription to Fox. It sounds... Hang on. That it sounds familiar. Yes, there's constant conflict in Westeros. People are trying to jostle for position. So the further away you get from King's Landing, which for those of you who haven't watched Game of Thrones, King's Landing is the capital of the city, and there's this family that controls it, the Lannisters, and they're all really cool. Some of them, I mean, the incest is a bit dodgy, but... So, King's Landing is the capital. That is the focal point of power in the world of Game of Thrones. If you are a Lannister, you are... And BTW, the Lannisters are obsessed with power. Absolutely obsessed with it. And they do everything that they can to maintain their power. Just as the Baratheons, I think, is another house in Game of Thrones. They're jostling to get power. And they come from... Is that it, the Baratheons, or...? Okay, sorry. But there are these two families, extremely wealthy, extremely powerful, competing for power in the world of Game of Thrones. Then you have another family called the Starks. I promise, this analogy works. Then you have another family, the Starks, who live miles away from King's Landing, way up in the north, up in the middle of nowhere. Probably not quite, even further than Nimbin. You'd say Byron? Okay. Sort of a major centre, you know, the education system there is not awful, but guess what? If you are a Stark, you always die. That's how it works. You have no power at all. And when you come down and try to compete with the people with all the power, you lose. Your dad... Oh no, I'm going to start ruining the plot here. It's season 4, catch up! You lose. I'm not going to read the books, I don't have time to do that. I've got to make up things like this. Do you know how long the lecture slide put together? Anyway, it's Google search for all these memes. If you don't have the cultural capital or the power that you need, you can't sort of jostle your way in there. It's a struggle. And this is what the conflict theorist version of the universe sort of suggests. It's concerned with the uneven distribution of power and resources. The closer you are to a major centre, the more power and the more resources you have. There was a study done in Australia, some of you may have heard it, it's called Gonski. And one of the things that the Gonski review identified was that the further away you get from a capital city, there is a decline in results, in outcomes, in performance. And they had all these other loadings as well for... to suggest to make up for all this disadvantage, they had loadings for disability, for ESL, for Aboriginality, etc. The further you get from capital cities, outcomes drop off. That's called a pattern. That means that there's a systemic problem in our schooling system. Something is going on. So the closer you are to capital cities, there's an uneven distribution of resources. Conflict theorists are concerned with how social structures, institutions, and ideologies serve the needs of particular groups, particularly powerful elite groups. I was listening to a podcast this morning on the train on the way back here, and a guy called Nick Cater, who writes for The Australian, was debating a guy named Guy Rundle, who writes for Crikey.com. And Nick Cater's saying there is this left-wing, latte-sipping, muesli-chewing, sandal-wearing elite that controls what you think in society. And Nick Cater works for Rupert Murdoch. Do you know what I mean? Let's talk about elites. There's one. So when you talk about social structures perpetuating elite privilege, what conflict theorists are looking at is how does power concentrate in the hands of a small group of people? At a school level, you might see that reproduced with a school principal. At a system level, you might see elite, wealthy schools attracting extra funding from the government, getting commitments from prime ministers of the day that they will get increased funding under a school model that's designed to create that equity that we talked about earlier. So Gonski was all about creating equity, and because of this jostling for power and privilege in a particular system, elite private schools manage to secure extra funding. There are questions there that a conflict theorist might go, oh my God, what is going on here in society that a group like this has so much influence politically that they can get this extra money? Conflict theory. Yes? Makes sense? Are you following me so far? Please throw your hand in the air and say, shut up, if it's not making sense. Or if you disagree with me, because that's cool. I'll just roll on. So schools are sites of social control and play a significant role in maintaining and consolidating the power of elite groups. Schools mostly educate children to uncritically accept their role as submissive workers, citizens, and consumers. When you look at curriculum reviews, it is political and controversial that we teach certain aspects of Aboriginal history in a classroom. It's not political and controversial that we teach commerce. See the problem there? It is political and controversial to teach commerce, but we don't talk about it that way. It's the uncritical acceptance of some facts of our education system. And they educate kids to be consumers. And this comes back to that idea of productivity. That we see schools as an engine room for an economy, and it does have that function, but schools surely are richer than that. Schools are not meritocratic. This is a myth. Schools reproduce social structure by the way they are organised, their curriculum, and the expectations and pedagogy of teachers, all of which are designed to sort students into categories at an early age and not offer fairness of opportunity. So you see, the structural functionalist point of view says schools are supposed to be meritocracies, and you go to school, you work hard, you come out the other end, you go to uni if you want, you get a job. You're set, and you fit into the social machine. And conflict theory says, hang on a second, schools are not meritocratic at all. Schools reinforce power and privilege and social structures. That is what they do. Do you agree? Please turn to the person next to you and share your thoughts so far. I realise I'm gesticulating wildly as I go, but... What do you reckon? Yeah, absolutely. It's hard. Listening up for a second now. So our final category that we wanted to have a look at, our final theory, symbolic interactionism. And symbolic interactionists are interested in the subjective meaning of human behaviour, so the social processes by which we make meaning for ourselves and how we share this meaning. So it's looking at who are you as an individual? And how do you relate to society? So let's step away from all that class concept. Let's step away from the big social groups and let's think about how you construct your identity. How has Pat walked into this lecture theatre and what are all the things that I bring to bear on my relationship with you? How am I trying to situate myself as an individual in this environment? In Summer Heights High, all the characters constantly trying to struggle to create their own identity. So you see Jonah struggles against those parental expectations and he's trying to get polyforce up to a good level. And then you've got Jamie, who is constantly trying to reinforce her position and her identity in the social milieu that she finds herself. Jamie acts confident, but do you really believe that she is, so 100% this is who I am? She's still battling against the social symbols and expectations that she has with people around her. She's trying to create Jamie the identity. That's why she takes over, the SRC and all that sort of stuff, tries to organise a formal. It's all about symbolic identity construction. And Mr. G strives to situate himself as important within the symbolic hierarchy of the school. And Mr. G's constantly referring to himself when he creates that play with Jessica. And it's all about Mr. G. Everything he does, it's about constructing a particular identity around himself and how he sees that identity relating to the school community. So symbolic interactionists are interested in how people make sense of their place in society and groups through mutual interaction in everyday life. They're interested in socialisation, so that process of acquiring knowledge, it occurs at a micro level between us when we have this conversation. Through the interaction with others in our social network, not just through structures and institutions. So not just through the structures that govern our lives, so politics and education systems and universities and hospitals and God knows what. And it's how we use the symbols that surround us and share meanings to create identity. So all of these brands and shirts and clothes and bags and Facebook and Twitter, nobody uses MySpace these days, Instagram, all your Snapchats, everything that you do, these are meaning-constructing, self-creating symbols. And it's the ability symbolic interactionists are interested in the ability of people to create change. So this is called agency. Your ability to create change in the structures and institutions that people build. And you can. Ultimately, all the structures that we have around us in society are built by people, and as people, you have control over it. There's that wonderful quote, what is it? Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does. So symbolic interactionists are interested in how people can enact their agency in the world, how they construct their identities, how these identities impact against their social circles, and how those identities shape the world around them and are shaped by the world around them. And it's at a symbolic level. I think Facebook's the really classic example of that. Because while you can see the sort of social things that bear down on Facebook, it's a company owned by a guy who just wants to sell your data and make a ton of profit. You create yourself in this digital world. You have total control over how you appear. So it's the ultimate symbolic interactionist medium. And it's still mediated by all those other social factors, but you have control. So, consider our video earlier. Jonah wants to be a break dancer. That is so fundamental to his identity. That's so fundamental to who he is in the schooling environment. It supersedes that structural functionalist view of society that you go to school to get a job. He's at school because he's there with his friends. That's the heartbreaking thing when at the end of, for those of you who haven't seen it, at the end of Summer Heights High, he has to read a story out to Gumnut Cottage. I cry my eyes out. It's so sad because what you're seeing is a kid who is, the social expectations ruin the personal desires and personal expectations. And this kid has a desire to actualise himself through breakdancing. And you laugh, but my God, we all have bodies. If that's what you choose to do and that's how you want to realise your identity, this sort of view of the world says, come on, have at it. What are we doing to support kids to realise who they want to be? How do they actualise that in a classroom environment and in a school environment? So we pursue that. Jamais cares about form. We sort of touched on that. Jamais is such a sociopath, though. And Mr. G wants to develop this lasting artistic identity. Maybe it's some sort of hangover from when he was at school because, you know, here he is still slaving it away in the classroom and no one cares and he's ridiculous. I think I'm going to end up like Mr. G one day. Except without hair. But, so this is the whole concept here. Forget about for a second those big picture forces that bear down on us. How do we relate to the people around us? Shrink your vision of society to the monkey sphere. What goes on inside that sphere of close personal acquaintances that shape our identities? Education isn't something that just happens to an individual. All those involved in schooling make meaning of the process. Teachers, students, principals and parents interact to create a meaning of education, and a student's view on this is dependent on their experiences. So kids bring so much to the classroom themselves. And a lot of that stuff that they bring comes from those social conflicts and structures. But a lot of it is just them as individual. How do they experience the world? What do they enjoy? What music do they listen to? Who are their friends? How does that shape their identity in the classroom? And likewise, when parents show up to the school, we have P&Cs. We talk about schooling community. There's this big sort of debate about schooling autonomy and to what extent you make a school itself autonomous and a part of the community. A lot of the funding that went to the BER program, situated schools, so, you know, they handed out all this money to primary schools. Yeah. Building the education revolution. So it was run by the Rudd and Gillard governments as part of the fiscal stimulus when the global financial crisis hit. Massive, massive success. Don't ever let anyone tell you it wasn't. Every school on the Central Coast loved the millions of dollars that were spent on those schools. And some schools, for example, Spencer Primary School and Kulnura is the one I'm thinking of. Kulnura Primary School got a library. For the first time, they had their books not covered in tarps. So these are huge changes to some schools. And when the halls were built in some of these schools, they were community sites. So it actually physically situated the school as a site in the community. Schooling doesn't always produce hardworking individuals who are committed to achieving great results. Some just want to be a breakdancer. Sometimes students and groups of students interpret the symbols of schooling. So that's the thing. They interpret all these things, A grades, NAPLAN tests. I mean, how do we interpret NAPLAN? Totally spun off in a crazy direction since it got uploaded to my school's website. Students interpret those things in different ways. Students interpret the HSC in a totally different way to a teacher, to their parents. So the meaning of school changes from individual to individual. Maybe turn to each other, and if you can think of an example of a kid whose concept of schooling you found radically different to everyone around them. Maybe you did. Maybe you thought school was for something different to your friends. Have a chat for a second. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it was just all about getting an ATAR and getting into the University of Newcastle. What do you reckon? Pretty like what? Just get an ATAR? Yeah. Really? And then you loved it when the HSC happened. Why? Okay, teachers make a big difference. Yeah. And what? How did it feel when it was working for you? Yeah. Becomes a natural thing. And would you say it became a part of who you are, or? Yeah. So when you enjoy a subject or something like that, it just transforms your understanding of schooling. This is kind of what the symbolic interactionist stuff's about. We bring our own understanding to bear on the school system. So, what do you reckon? Just to get to uni? Oh, interesting. So where would you situate that on these three? Where would you put that on these three sort of social theories? It fits most conveniently within what? Something to think about for tutorial. Okay, to sum up a couple of things. So finally, it's worth asking, does the teacher's role differ according to different sociological theories of education? Think about these going into your tutorials. What does each theory mean for the way a good teacher would approach social differences between groups of students in the classroom? How are good teachers socialised and for what purpose? How the expectations put on you as a teacher, not just a student? And under what conditions can good teachers be agents for change? See you later. What conditions make teachers good agents for change? What do you need in the classroom to be able to make the world a better place? I love this quote here. If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. That's what you're doing for every kid in your classroom. You're making their lives better. Whatever of these theories we look at, that's the fundamental message. What are you doing to achieve a good change for these kids in the classroom? Do you agree? I mean, if you're going into it to make their lives worse, walk out, because that's crazy and a waste of time. You get good holidays, I suppose. So what do good teachers look like? Bearing all of these theories and all these concepts in mind, what can you do to make the classroom environment a positive environment? Keeping in mind that you have all of these pressures that bear down. The pressures are symbolic within the children's social networks, how they're trying to define themselves and grow up. You've also got those class and conflict pressures bearing down on the classroom. What does that look like? How does that impact on your specific classroom and your school? And what are the expectations socially? Schools is an engine room for the economy. What expectations are coming out the other end? Is schooling just to get into university? By the fact of this living, sociological living, he contributes however minutely to the shaping of society and to the course of history, even as he is made by society and by its historical push and shove. So you, through your sociological imaginations, contribute to the shaping of society. You can impact all of these processes. You are an opportunity to break cycles of entrenched disadvantage. You have an opportunity to make the world a better place. What are you going to do? That's all. Thank you. Thank you. See you later. See you later. Good one. Yes, I will put them up on Blackboard. I just wanted them to be a bit of a surprise, you know, so, and it's a pretty big file. So. I was going to upload them and then I'm like, oh, no, I kind of want it to be a surprise because if everybody's watched it, and it's more of a didactic scream at your lecture anyway, so it's not going to, you haven't lost too much. No, I think you'll have Erica for that. You're supposed to have Erica this week, but a few people aren't available, so I think so. Really? Thank you. Thank you. Awesome.